Hey everyone, it's Stephanie, and you are tuned into the review of Married at First Sight, Season 6, Episode 4. This episode was jam-packed for everyone. Each couple had a lot going on, so I can't wait to start talking about them. But if you are new and you haven't seen the show, you can go back to the first review. I discussed a little bit about the background and how it came to be, so you can catch up real quick. But it's definitely a very interesting and quite entertaining show. I also have for you 3 takeaways that I got because I was really looking at it like, what can I learn from this and what can I share with other people? So towards the end of the video, I'm going to give you the 3 takeaways as well. So let's just jump right in. This season is proving to be different in just kind of like the way that they are structuring things. You know, we've already seen that they met meeting, getting rings. The women and men were able to meet separately, which is great because there's an additional support in just knowing, oh, you know, I know somebody else is going through this, but I don't meet them. So I almost feel like I'm on an island. So you get to say, oh, here are these other 2 individuals going through this as well. So that was great. We also get to see them all honeymoon in the same space, which is very smart because they're provided the additional support. We've seen in past seasons where honeymoons go, you know, significantly dysfunctionally for a lack of a better word, and sometimes I look and I'm like, oh my god, if somebody could be intervening at this point, that would really turn things around. So having them all in the same location allows somebody to be there. I'm sure some sort of staff is there, where if they needed that additional support, they could have that and it wouldn't stretch them too thin. So I love that. What we see in this episode that we haven't seen before is the couples actually hang out on their honeymoon together. And that's really interesting because I think there is a energy that you have in your relationship between you and your significant other, and then I think there's a couple energy that you bring when you spend time with other couples. And what's also cool about that is you get to learn from them, and you can learn good or bad. So I mean, sometimes, you know, you're looking at a couple and they have such a synergy that you're like, oh gosh, I want that, or that's so special, like, and if you feel like you're missing that, that is wanting you to establish that in your own relationship. So it's very good that way. And sometimes it has you learn to be grateful for what you have, because, you know, we've all been around those couples that are like, oh my God, they're tough to watch. And you suddenly are grateful for the lack of that dysfunction in your own relationship. And you're grateful for your significant other because you're like, man, I'm so glad that we're not in that space. But you don't really get to see that if it's just the 2 of you. So I think that was great. And then also it's another bonding experience of somebody else who's going through something that they're going through, and they get to kind of connect in that way and be supported in that way. So I'm kind of going to bounce around with the couples in various parts of this not relationship, in various parts of this episode. So I don't know who I usually start off with, but the first to come to mind right now are Jackie and Ryan. So last week I said that I felt like they were great and that they were almost like perfect. And I think that they still are great, but I'm seeing this episode that the pink cloud that they're on is kind of lifting. Jackie at one point says that he's, annoying, or he might be annoying, or something to the fact, because he talks a lot. You know, these are the things that you don't get to see when you're so enamored, or you don't pay attention to when you're so enamored with love and what you want, but everybody has characteristics that need to be worked on, or just flaws that, you have to deal with. And so I laughed out loud when she said, like, oh God, this is going to get, annoying, because it is what it is. Like, the fact that he talks a lot is a characteristic of him, and that's something that as his wife you're going to have to deal with. But it was funny because it wasn't just so perfect anymore between the 2 of them. Also, they were doing an assignment that required them to identify their character flaws. And so I was kind of waiting for the story with Jackie and her past to come up. She told Ryan about her ex-boyfriend who passed away a year and a half ago. And in the one of the interview, she referred to him as the love of her life. And so I think he did a really good job at supporting her and being open, because there's really no way to address that except for being supportive so early in a relationship. I mean, this is really day 3 or 4, and so early in just even knowing someone. I think that he definitely had smart concerns, though, because in one of the confessionals he said that he hopes that doesn't inhibit their relationship and that she can move forward with them. I completely agree with that, and I'm glad that he recognizes that, because for something that traumatic to happen, you don't get over that quickly, and I don't think that she's over it, and that's 100% okay. But I do think that 1.5 years ago is so recent. So a part of me is wondering, is she really over the trauma enough to have a fruitful relationship that has sustainability? It's one thing to move on and start dating again, but a marriage is a completely different beast. And there's a lot of weight and responsibility with that. So the moment I even heard that initially, I was kind of like, okay, I'm a little worried there, but her heart is in the right place. She wants to move on. She even says in one of the interviews that she knows what that relationship meant, and she doesn't compare the relationship that she's wanting with Ryan to that relationship. And I think that's healthy. Like the therapist in me heard that and was like, okay, I'm glad, because there's so much power with awareness. If we don't know, we can't change things. So the fact that she's aware that she doesn't want that relationship to the past of that relationship to hinder the possibility of a relationship with Ryan is great, because if and when she does something that might do that, she'll pick up on it and she'll be able to remedy that before it really gets in the way of that. So that is like a huge thing for them. I'm sure that will continue to come up throughout the season, because 1.5 years is really not that long for a trauma, and we can never really determine when somebody is able to move on. But just my personal and professional opinion, usually, that's not a long time. But I am happy to see her aware, and I'm happy to see her moving forward. And I was happy to see him kind of support her in that way and make her comfortable enough to share that. So that was like a win for those two. On the flip side, with Ryan, one of the things I really like about him is that he is he's fearless. He really doesn't care what people think. And there's a part of the episode where he puts on floaties because they're going like paddle boarding, and it was hilarious. Everybody was kind of like clowning him because he looks kind of dorky, because they look like kid floaties. Like if you're not gonna make it, those floaties are not gonna they're not gonna save you. But he wore them anyways, and it made me think of one of the episodes. I think I told you about this a couple of reviews ago, where the guys were making fun of him because of the ring size. It was just giving him a hard time. And where he's been consistent is he does not care what people think. He wanted to be married. He didn't care what they were saying about his intended, and he went with it. He didn't care that he was in front of these new people and with, essentially child's floaties on, getting into the water, and everybody's kind of laughing. He didn't care. And where I see that going really well for him is that will strengthen his marriage, because you have to be a united front, and you have to learn how to block out what people are saying. And a lot of people have opinions on relationships. They have opinions on relationships they know, of people they know, and opinions on people they don't know. And I think the opinions get heightened when you get married. Everybody has something to say, and you don't have to take it all. You really don't have to take any of it, but you really do have to learn how to be a united front with your spouse. And if you feel like anybody is saying something of malice or doing something that could harm your spouse or your relationship, you have to be very determined to be consistent with blocking that out. And just, through these little things that I've seen him do, he wants it so bad, like he's not going to put up with anybody saying anything. And I thought that was just such a funny way of him reflecting that. So that was great. I really enjoyed seeing them this week, and I'm glad to see that, some layers are being removed. So that was really good. Let's do Jephte and Shawniece, because I usually save them for the end, but I'm just going to throw them in the middle and shake things up a little bit. So, Jephte and Shawniece were like a roller coaster to me this episode. I can't say it was all bad, but I can't say it was all good. And the whole episode was just ups and downs. Like, I was, watching it and I was like, yes. And then I was like, oh God, no, it was too much. And I think it ended on a low note for me. But there were elements that gave me a little bit of hope. I'm a hopeless romantic, by the way. And I feel like it's not something that can't be worked on. But there just has to be an intervention. So just briefly, parts that stuck out to me is they did a hike. They did a hike to a waterfall. He was not really wanting to do it. Like, if she would have said, I don't want to do this anymore, he wouldn't have done it. Where I give him a thumbs up for doing it is because he really didn't want to, but he also didn't want her to go by herself. So in a way, he was being very protective of her, which is like a stand-up thing to do. And it gave me the illusion, if you will, that he is willing to compromise, but he's not, because throughout the episode, he's kind of like, listen, I'm stubborn and I know it, I'll compromise if I have to, but if I don't, then I won't. And that to me is like, okay, that sounds like most of the time you don't. They seem to be turning a corner during that whole episode, at times, because he was affectionate with her at the waterfall. If you guys saw that, he also was willing to kind of play a little bit more, and he went to the top of the waterfall when he really didn't want to do that. He even said in his interviews, we're getting closer, and I'm feeling like we're getting closer, and I can grow to really, really care about her. And it felt so good. It was like a glass of warm milk. And then fast forward to when they're hanging out with all the other couples at the beach, she jumped into the water and she hurt her foot, and he was very like callous about it. He was basically like, I told you not to jump in. Next time you should listen to me. I mean, it was hard to watch because she sat down and she was like, she thought she had glass in her foot or something, and she was checking it out. He did not go to her. He did not say, can I help you? There was no level of concern. It was very much, I told you so, I told you so. And that does not work for any relationship. It's almost like a child. If they're running around, and they fall, and you keep saying, hey, like before they fall, hey, stop running, stop running. When they fall, you don't watch them on the ground crying and say, I told you so, because the nurturer, the protector in you will help them up, even if you did. And I feel like most people in that space would have done that. I think most men, definitely the other two couples, if their wives were to get hurt, whether they, forewarned them or not, there would have been some concern. So where in some areas he seems to be a protector, in some areas he's very, very not there. And I can't really read him right now, because I was thinking that, okay, things are getting a little bit better. He's definitely a slow starter. But he's so calculated that I'm wondering, why even do this experiment? Like, being that calculated, like I've had many conversations with people about this experiment, and many people have said, I would never do that. I could never do that. I'm XYZ way, and there's no way that would work for me. Being who he was, or who he is, I would love to talk to him and see, why did you even get involved to begin with if you knew that you were that calculated? Because you actually did the complete opposite, to jump into something like this, being so reserved. And And there seems to be, throughout their dynamic, he shuts down, they got into an argument, and I honestly, the argument happened so fast, I really don't even remember how it happened. It was so minimal. It went back to the whole stranger danger thing. And, of course she gets upset and she's emotional, but this episode, you can see that she was trying, where she could have been hurt, that he didn't look after her when she got hurt. She said, you know what, I'm going to let it go. I don't want to start an argument. And he's still back to this, you're a stranger thing. And it just seems very immature. I don't understand where this reservation comes from. I'm seeing that they're missing kind of male roles in their lives, so I'd love to see how that plays out. She kept saying that she's looking for a leader. She's wanting to follow her husband, so she's looking for someone that she can follow and trust in. But I really don't think he's mature enough. I really don't think he knows how to assert himself as a leader in a role like that, and she's looking for someone like that, but I don't know that he's even seen it. So as the oldest child, he's been made to be the leader, but a lot of times you follow before you lead, and I don't know that he's been able to do that, because he said that he hasn't had like a huge male role in his life. So a lot of that stuff is coming up. We don't really look at those things. We're just like, oh, we're in love and we want to get married. But a lot of the family dynamics and the relationships that either were there or were not there, or the way that we interacted with both of our parents or the parent that was there, it reflects itself into the relationships that we have later on. So the fact that, she comes from a single home, she's looking for that father role and she's looking for that male leader. Okay, that's reflected in how she's looking to him, begging him essentially to do that. And the fact that he doesn't know how to do that is reflected in the fact that he really didn't have someone to follow, based on what I've seen so far. So, I know a lot of people, because I've seen so many comments, a lot of people don't think it's going to work out at all. If I could just pause and get into the TV, I believe that there's still a way to turn a corner. Sometimes we don't know when we're doing things that impede in our goal, whatever that is. And if somebody, press pause on your rant or whatever shenanigans you're getting into and said, knock it off. This is what you're doing. I know you think you're doing this, but this is what you're really doing. Or I know you think it's coming off as this, but this is how it's really coming off. If we were able to press pause and somebody was able to get us together like that, chances are our behavior, if we were willing to, would change. I feel like he's so stuck on being who he's been, and that has served him in a way. And his, family and a lot of the key people in his life celebrate him for being that. He's never had to be anything different. So he really doesn't know. So for me, I wish that, every now and then we can just interject, because there is a way that they can turn a corner, but there has to be some sort of intervention, because, with marriage, you try, it doesn't end because it's not working. I want him to see it that way. I want him to see that it is a marriage. Get out of the whole stranger mentality. It's not a blind date. It's a marriage. So you can't kind of tiptoe around it as if, oh, well, it may or may not work out, because he seems to be doing that, where she seems to be like, we're married, and she recognizes that. And so she's treating it as such, and he's not really valuing it. So, y'all, I'm still gonna have hope, because I just am. Being a people person, I believe, if they don't want to do it, then they won't. But it's not that it's irreparable right now, just based on my opinion. So, Molly and John, I think they are coming across really well. They're getting closer. They illustrated to me a great form of communication. So they go get a couples massage. Molly is uncomfortable with that. She's never gotten a massage. She doesn't like being touched. And of course, Jonathon is very attracted to her, but, like a gentleman, he says, hey, you're in the driver's seat. We'll do this when when you're comfortable doing it. And she definitely says she's attracted to him and she wants to, be intimate with him at some point. But she was just saying how she doesn't like to be touched. And so you could tell that was a little awkward for him, because of course he wants to touch her, and he's probably thinking, oh God, what does this mean for us? And she could have just let that go, and it could have just been like this ongoing weird moment of like, I don't know what to do with you. But she illustrated a really good way of communicating by saying, listen, I don't even know why I'm like that. I've just always been like that. But I will move at my own pace, and as I get comfortable, then I do it. But it's not something that, if I'm pushed, will serve the person who's pushing me, because it just gives me anxiety and it makes me uncomfortable. Seems like such a simple thing, but a lot of times we don't do that. We don't communicate effectively, and we just hope that somebody gets it, or we don't even care that they get it. And so what could have been something that maybe gotten in the way in the future, she shared she shared how she felt about it. She shared what she thought about it. And she also shared that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So as she gets comfortable, he'll be able to be more affectionate with her, which gives him perspective on how she feels and what she's going through. And so it ends up being something that like isn't a thing. It doesn't have to become a thing if we just talk about it. So I love seeing that dynamic with them, because it just shows that they're growing on their own pace, but it's not remaining surface. It's kind of like moving along as it should be, and they're still getting along very great. So my 3 tips, just for marriage, but really relationships in general and moving forward, because a lot of times in these shows and in general, people want to get married and they are, saying things like, I just want to wake up next to someone, or I want to have something, something, I want to have someone to do things with, and I just want to be happy, all of these things that are beautiful. And they do happen. You do wake up next to someone and you have someone to do things with. But these are just a couple of tips just from this episode that I thought would be beneficial if you're thinking about that, or if you just even want to, increase the depth of your own relationship. So, number 1, marriage is compromise. So, we hear that, we're like, oh, duh, marriage is compromise. That's not a big deal. It is, because the definition of compromise in a marriage or in any long-term relationship, is not always that you get like a little bit and the other person gets a little bit. Like, the compromise is not always 50-50. And in getting married, a part of you has to die to yourself. And what I mean by that is you kind of have to like get over yourself, get over the fact that it always has to be about you, or it always has to be something that you're comfortable with. And it's more give and take. So the compromise is giving and taking. Yeah, sometimes we'll be able to do 50-50. Sometimes we could do, 2 days a week and another 2 days a week. Sometimes it's not. Like, Sundays during football season is football Sunday at the house, okay? And that's on, okay? I'm not a football girl. Like, I'm learning, but my husband is all about it. So the compromise is that it's football Sunday, and I don't get in the way of that. That's his thing. He loves that. It makes him happy. He's passionate about it. The compromise is that he gets to do that. Just like the compromise is that, my shows, he doesn't get in the way of, or girls' night, he doesn't get in the way of, girls' brunch, whatever. There's this misconception that I have to be comfortable in the compromise. And if you really elevate your understanding of long-lasting relationships, everybody doesn't always get their way. And it's about allowing yourself to be okay with that and not taking it as a loss, but giving room for your partner to have what they desire, and actually supporting that. I'm happy to see, him enjoying the game and so on and so forth. So that's a big thing. Just wrapping your mind around that it's not always going to be what you want it to be, and it's not always going to be comfortable, and that's okay. So that's one. Second tip, communication is key. So it sounds so simple, okay? People have been saying it forever. People are not doing it. We are saying what we want to say as much as we are comfortable with. And sometimes we're not saying anything at all, expecting the other person to just figure it out. And I'm guilty. I mean, typical, woman, I'm guilty. Like, he should know. That never works out for me. I end up shoulding all over myself because he should know. They should know. Well, they don't. And so how does that serve you? If you just say what you want, you would be alarmed at how quickly things change, because now that someone knows, now that the information is out there, they can do what they will with it. And oftentimes you get the result you're looking for. Part of relationships is really communicating effectively enough to deepen that relationship. And you can't do that with just assuming that people are going to meet your needs based on, what you're not saying. It just doesn't make sense. So get comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations, because that will be, life-changing for that relationship. The last one is marriage is a mirror. So a lot of times we get into relationships and we're like, I've worked on myself, I've done XYZ, I am who I am, I'm ready, and that's great. But the evolution of you is always going to be evolving. Okay. It's ever changing. And marriage will really put a mirror in your face, and you won't like what you see. There will be an aspect where you don't like what you see, because a lot of times with our family and friends, if there's a characteristic or something that gets in the way of the relationship, what do? Nothing. I don't have to change myself for my girlfriend. I don't have to change myself for my uncle. Like, this is me. I used to say, love it or leave it. I don't care. This is me. And those relationships can be parallel. So uncle or best friend or whatever, we can walk together and it's like, she has an attitude, whatever, I don't care. However, romantic relationships and marriages are more enmeshed. So they're interlaced. So you cannot function in a healthy relationship if you're ignoring what's in the mirror. You have to look at it. And oftentimes your partner shows you what's in the mirror based on how you're acting, based on how you're reacting. And so you get to really see who you are and the things that you need to work on through this other person, through the dynamic that you've created. And you'll see reflections of how your parents maybe used to be, or how your friendships are, because who you are doesn't really change based on the situation. You bring who you are everywhere you go. So those are just the 3 tips that I have. I hope that they were helpful. I hope that you really enjoyed this episode. Of course, I will be here next week doing the review for episode 5. If you loved it, subscribe and comment. I've been getting a lot of comments and I love the dialogue. It is absolutely great. And I'm so excited every time somebody says something, because I'm like, I didn't think about that. So let me know what you think, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.